ready for us to begin. So, welcome to everyone. My name's Andy Hockley. Sorry, I'll just sit back away from the screen a bit, otherwise you can't see me. My name's Andy Hockley, and I am the coordinator of the IATEFL's Leadership and Management Special Interest Group, LAMSIG. And we are delighted this month to have, we run 3 webinars a year usually, and this month we're delighted to welcome Deniz Kurtoğlu Eken from Sabancı University in Istanbul to give us today's webinar. I won't go any further than that. I will hand over the mic to Deniz and let her take it away. So enjoy, everyone.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy, and welcome to all of you, wherever you are. Most of you seem to have snow where you are. We had it earlier this morning, as I wrote to some of you, but it's sort of cleared away now. I actually have a great view out of my office window. Wish I could share that with you. Before we sort of start fully, I'm just wondering if you have any trouble hearing me, if you could write in the chat box there. Otherwise, I would like to start. Okay, excellent. That's good to hear. Okay, well, can you guess who the person is in that initial slide? Not very difficult, is it? No. Yes, it is me. This is, as you can see, taken by the sea. And the reason why I chose this slide is because to me, research of all kinds, whether it's classroom research or school institutional research, or even, mind you, academic research, makes me think of the sea and the ocean, as it's really vast, and you know, the deeper you go, the greater you discover, the more you discover. So I thought it would be a good one for that. Okay, so let's start our webinar. And if you read the initial abstract on the LAMSIG website, you will have seen the abstract there in terms of the 2 aspects that I will focus on in the webinar. So here's our outline. The role of institutional research in fostering a learning and growth-oriented culture for greater school effectiveness. So basically, we're looking at institutional research. And of course, I would like to share with you some practical tools and processes in order to help us assess, or a school assess, enrich and enhance our practices, and to help us also in more informed decision making, that our decision making is based on data and that it is data-driven rather than, you know, ad hoc, so to speak, for want of a better way of putting it. So that's our outline. The presentation will last about 45 minutes, not more, and I'll make sure there's an opportunity for questions at the end. But if you feel you want to ask a question as we go along, please feel free to do so by typing it in the chat box, which I'll make sure I keep an eye on. Okay, so just a bit of background about Sabancı University School of Languages. I'll try and keep it brief. Basically, we're an English medium university, a private university in Turkey. And the School of Languages, the key role that the school plays is to ensure that students who will be studying in an English medium university have or will have the required level of language proficiency and academic skills needed for their academic studies. So we have a 1-year intensive English language program that helps students do that if they already do not possess a certain language proficiency, which is like, for us, it's like B2 plus in terms of the Common European Framework. So that's us. We're not a very big school. We have on average 650 to 700 students every year, and we have a teaching population for English only around 60 teachers. Okay, so why do we need institutional research, or why have I chosen this as a topic? I'm sure you've all heard about classroom research and research for academic studies, but maybe institutional research is not carried out as often as we would like it to be. So, and because I'm heavily involved in it and I feel we gain a lot of benefits out of it, I decided to choose this for my topic. The rationale, I have listed them in terms of bullet points here. I think one of the most exciting things that institutional research helps us do is to help us focus on an understanding of what's happening around us in the school and on trying to make meaning or sense out of the practices, the school practices that we have. That's one of the first things. The second one is that it's developmental. I mean, what better way can we think of than a school being interested in research and wanting to develop itself further? By doing so, it also allows itself, i.e. the school allows itself, to be reflective. We encourage teachers to be reflective all the time. We do the same with our students. We say reflect, reflect, we guide them. But then at the school level, we want to ensure that this is also the case. Another rationale is, unlike maybe common or popular belief, where research is considered to be a sort of unreachable, well, not unreachable, but research is considered to be a sort of a mammoth thing, it's got to be something huge, it's got to be generalizable, etc. In terms of what I would like to promote, it's not that at all. It's actually, on the contrary, very practical and doable. And the final rationale I have as one of the key points here is that eventually, therefore, and after carrying out the research, what we achieve, what we get out of it will help guide us and help us enhance our school practices and hopefully teaching and learning practices. Now, there's a nice model that I would like to share with you here, which I think we can apply to institutional research as well. It comes from a source by Jeffs and Piera. It's quite recent, 2016. It's actually on formative feedback. It's a model for formative feedback, but it also applies, I believe, for institutional research, and that's why I'd like to share it with you. This is what it is. As you can see, it says focus on formative feedback at the top here, and at the bottom in the circle it says for teaching development. Now, in terms of the steps, in the middle we have these 5 steps: curiosity, ask, receive, reflect, and act, which I think are wonderful, because this is very similar to how we would go about research on a school development level. We need to be curious and wonder about things to be able to, second step, ask questions, to be able to, third step, receive data, to be able to then, fourth step, reflect upon this data, and hopefully then the last and final step, to actually act upon it. Now, acting upon it doesn't necessarily mean, changing everything. It's as I said earlier, it means making informed decisions based on what you collect. So for short, this is called the CARA model. And it's CARA because of it's the acronym for curiosity, ask, receive, reflect, and act. So if you would like to look at this document in detail, also for the purpose of formative feedback, you can simply type in Jeffs and Piera 2016 CARA, and it will give you the source. Okay, so this is the model I would propose for institutional feedback, not feedback, sorry, institutional or school research as well. So, what tools can we use for institutional research? Let's have a look. Well, the first one of these, and the most commonly used ones for all sorts of reasons and aims, are surveys. Mostly these are online surveys. We're very lucky these days that there are a lot of online survey tools available and free of charge. So things like the Google survey forms or SurveyMonkey, which is one of our favorites because we've been using it for a long time and we have institutional membership for it. So it's a paid membership, but all our teachers can use it, and I strongly recommend it for schools. Another hang on a second. Another one is, again, quite sort of common, maybe not as common as surveys, but are interviews. And along with those, I've also included forums because these are very similar. Forums are like focused group interviews, which we can hold with students or teachers or administrators. And interviews, as you know, come in all forms. They could be one-to-one. They could be semi-structured, sort of semi-formal, if you like, or, which I think is more practical, we mentioned practical as one of the rationale points earlier, to do group interviews because those are more practical. And in the School of Languages, we actually carry out a lot of group interviews with students and forums with both students and teachers. Another tool, sorry, that was the example, yes, learner and teacher forums, which we regularly hold every semester. Another tool is observations. There's all sorts of observations. In the School of Languages, our observations are developmental, meaning that we do not focus on assessment of teaching, but we engage in collaborative and collegial discussions on teaching and learning practices. And as you know, they come in all types: peer observation, self-observation, three-way, four-way observation, etc. This is not the focus of our examples today, but I still wanted to include it in this chart because I think it's a useful institutional development tool for research. The next one is one of my favorites, and also one that I think is sort of neglected and people, professionals, seem to take for granted. What do I mean by this? Well, documents. There's so many documents all around us. Documents from the classroom, documents from all sorts of institutional reports, documents from classroom observations, documents from even emails, email correspondence, or minutes, minutes of the meeting, documents from notes taken during an interview, etc., etc. I mean, there's a huge sort of wealth of resources there. And I've put that together with corpus analysis basically because we have tools, again, free, online, available, like the one I have exemplified here, Lawrence Anthony's software. It's called AntConc for short, and this will be available, the presentation, later on the site. So, you know, if you can't make a note of it now, you can always do so later. This is a freely available tool which you can use to analyze any document as long as it's translated, well, not translated, transformed into a text version, which you can do on your, obviously, computer, Microsoft Word, yeah? So you transform any document, let's say it's a report, okay? And you upload it onto the AntConc app, the freely available AntConc app. And what does it give you? Well, it gives you loads of things. One of the most frequently used things through corpus analysis is frequency of occurrence of concepts, of words. And additionally, what it gives you, an analysis gives you, is the concordance lines in which a word occurs. Now, to make this clear, I'll show you an example in a minute. But before we do that, let me also share, Andy, thank you for the email link, not the email link, the web link. That's exactly the one I mean. So you can actually get the link from there, dear viewers. Let me mention the last one as well, and then we can move on to the examples. Okay, the last one in terms of institutional research that I would recommend as a tool are things that we can sort of do even at the very last minute in a meeting or with colleagues or teaching partners or in the classroom with students, to have short exploratory discussions and or activities exploring a specific topic or a specific question on which the institution, the school, would like to receive some ideas on, would like to receive some maybe feedback on. So these are the 5 key tools that I believe are extremely useful for institutional research. Okay, I told you we'd look at a corpus sample. So now we're going to move on to the research samples. Okay, the first one is the corpus one. Don't worry if you can't read it. Again, as I said, these slides will be available later on the LAMSIG website. But as you can see, the key word here that I've tried to analyze, is the word motivation. Now, where does this document come from? This document comes from, we have a series of publications, the reference for which I will provide you at the end of the webinar. It is from our learner development publication. And in order to ensure systematicity in terms of how we were using the concept of motivation, along with several others, which I don't have time here to go into, we decided to go for a corpus analysis. And as you can see, the word motivation is in the middle here, because this is what the program does for you, the ANDCONC program, which Andy kindly gave us the reference for, the link for. And you can see all the concordance lines, the contexts, or rather co-texts in which they occur. So this helps us, this helps a professional, in case you decide to use it, I hope so, you to analyze how and in what co-texts you have used this concept. Why do I think this is important? Well, in order to possibly revise, refine, discard, adapt, change the way you go about employing a certain thing. Now, what we see here are only, I haven't counted them, but probably like 15 occurrences of the word, because I don't have neither the time nor the number of slides to share them with you. But as you can see at the top here, it says n equals 75. So ANDCONC also told us that throughout our book on learner development, there were 75 occurrences of the word, the concept motivation. Andy, is there a problem with the, or I'll just continue. Let me know if there's a problem with the recording or the viewing. Okay, so this is one of the tools then, corpus analysis and document analysis. We'll look at another example of document analysis in a second. But can I also say at this point that you can use corpus analysis even for your own personal development. Oh, am I not here? Yes, I am. Okay, sorry, just 1 second to make sure everybody is doing okay. Has there been a break in the recording? A little bit. The sound just breaks for a second. Okay, well, let me see. Maybe I should bring the microphone closer. I don't know if there's... Okay. All right, good. So let me continue then. Okay, so Let's look at the second example. So what are we looking at now? We're looking at examples of institutional research. We've just looked at corpus analysis and document analysis, and we're now looking at a second example, which is a recent example from, again, our school, Sabancı University School of Languages. This was within the aim or with a view to researching our school's teaching profile. And remember, I told you that there's so many documents just sitting there, and maybe we tend to ignore exploiting them or analyzing them or using them. Well, this is how it started. We had a 5-year analysis between 2003 and 2008, focusing on the analysis of a total of 105 feedback documents from developmental classroom observations. Then we had a gap, unfortunately, but very recently I did the same analysis for over a 3-year period, as you can see, from 2014 to 2017, analyzing 56 feedback forms on developmental classroom observations. Now, these observations were based, the analysis of the feedback forms were based on our effective teaching criteria, because we already have effective teaching criteria. And if you're interested in looking at what our teaching criteria looks like, what I've done is, this is my website, dear viewers, as you can see, and again, you'll have reference to this later on through the slides. I have uploaded our teaching criteria on my website, and it says criteria for effective teaching in the right-hand column. So you'll be able to see it from there, and I suppose you can even download it. So please feel free to use it if you think it might be useful for your purposes too. We have no time to go into the criteria in detail, and it's also beyond the purpose of this webinar, but I just briefly want to mention to you the 5 areas that our teaching criteria covers. It's these 5, as you can see on the screen. And I chose the leaf metaphor because I think it nicely represents especially the concept of rapport and communication with learners running as a thread through all the other categories or main areas in the criteria. Okay, so what have I just said? This is the second example after the document analysis and the corpus example, but it is yet another example for document analysis because, and I would like to highlight this, I think it's very important, rather than letting feedback forms sort of rot on shelves, for want of a better way of saying it, or collect dust on shelves, why not use them for institutional research purposes in order to analyze your school's teaching profile? So, based on the effective teaching criteria, this is what I did. I collated all the strengths in one document. Thank you, Andy, for sharing my website. I collected all the strengths in one document, and what I'm sharing with you here are only extracts, sort of in different colors to help you read them more easily. But don't worry if you can read them all. I'll just give you sort of 30 seconds to look through them. These are all strengths, focusing on the strengths of lessons observed over a 3-year period. And there's so many others, of course, but these are just to give you an idea, okay? So, looking at all of those strengths and using our criteria for effective teaching, I analyze them and categorize them in terms of the different areas in the teaching criteria. I think these are sort of maybe not fully legible, but maybe you can read them. I'll just read out a few, especially the asterisked ones. For example, praise. The single asterisked ones, relationship with learners, using knowledge and previous learning, attitude towards learners, okay? These are all have single asterisk. What does this mean? If you look at the coding on the right-hand side in the gray box there, it says continues to be a strength. So this is what the analysis shows, that these were a strength in the past. Remember I mentioned to you the 5-year analysis between the earlier years. So that's what it's comparing this data to. These continue to be a strength. And the double asterisk, let's see which ones those are. Exploitation of materials and tasks, feedback, participation and involvement, referring to students, of course, and checking understanding. Now, these ones have double asterisks. Why? Let's look at the code. The code says, well, these were a further development area, still are, but now they are more of a strength. So it means we have come some way in comparison to what came out of our previous analysis in terms of these areas, okay? And here you see the percentages of occurrence in terms of what I found after analyzing the data in terms of strengths. Now, of course, this is all very nice, but as a school, as an institution, in our research, we also want to make sure that we look at areas for further development. Similarly, I did the same for areas for further development. Now, this is a long phrase, as I'm sure you'll agree, but we are very systematic and insistent and consistent, I hope, in our use of this phrase, because we hate the word weakness, both for teachers, for teaching, for students, and for schools, because we don't have weaknesses, we have challenges or areas for further development. So what are these? Again, I'll give you maybe like 20 seconds to cast your eyes over the, excuse me, over those 4 extracts. Okay, so that gives you an idea, and again, there's obviously many more. But what did I do? What did we do? We grouped them, we categorized them, using what? Using the criteria for effective teaching, as we did with the strengths, okay? And again, remember, this criteria is available on my website, which Andy, the link to which Andy has provided to us in the chat box. So here's the analysis of areas for further development. Now, what we see here, and I think, again, you can sort of read the points there. What we have here, let's look at the code box. It says continues to be an area for further development. If it's a single asterisk. What is an example here? Look at this one. Time for learners, pace, and then challenge. So this means in the areas of providing adequate time or space for learners, lesson pace, and providing challenge for learners, we are still not doing as well as we might be. It means that these are still areas for further development for us. Double asterisk, again, we're looking at the code box here, was a strength, now a further development area, which came as a surprise, but it's only natural. Let's look at the double asterisk. Which ones, or which one is it? Well, maybe not surprisingly, it is instructions and task setting. One reason when I shared this data and the results with my colleagues here at the School of Languages that I shared is that maybe we are taking this for granted. In other words, maybe we're assuming that giving instructions and setting a task is so easy that we don't need to focus on it anymore. Maybe we're sort of too automated in this area. And maybe that is why it has become an area for further development. And finally, in the code box, the ones that are circled in orange mean that these are more of a strength now in comparison to what the situation was in the first analysis, the 5-year analysis. So what are these? It looks like as a school, we seem to have improved in our elicitation techniques, in our feedback giving and feedback techniques, in our monitoring and support of and for learning and learners, and in our exploitation of materials and tasks. Okay, so in terms of considerations and implications, I think one of the biggest ones, and this might be another webinar, maybe for another colleague, or another session somewhere, that it's very important for a school, especially having conducted this sort of study, not to take our strengths, their strengths, for granted. Too often, it's the same in classrooms, in teaching and observations, we seem to focus on what's missing. We seem to focus on sort of the negatives, the weaknesses, which, as I told you, we try and avoid and not use. And this image here, this cartoon, is a really good one, which I often refer to in terms of making sure that as an institution, we don't lose track of what we have got. We don't lose track of our assets and not focus on the deficits. It doesn't mean I'm suggesting we ignore them, but if we don't appreciate what we already have, how can we actually go forward in a healthy manner? So this is clearly to us a very important consideration and implication. Another one is that, of course, we have to consider these findings in our both individual and collaborative teaching practices. So the individual one being our target setting meetings with our director. We can sort of prioritize our teaching goals based on this analysis because it's come from within, it's not somebody saying to us, hey, focus on this. It's our own feedback form suggesting this. And also in collaborative practices such as peer observations or team teaching. Prioritizing areas for further development in the light of the analysis. I sort of mentioned that through target setting meetings, I suppose, but individually as well in terms of our own classroom teaching and day-to-day planning. And a final one is that we use the updated criteria in relevant documents and for our reference. This is actually something I forgot to mention a few minutes ago. Remember I told you that we based our analysis on the effective teaching criteria, but then it also went the other way round. After the analysis, I found myself sitting down with the teaching criteria, effective teaching criteria, and making changes to it in terms of additions, rewording, maybe changing a few things around in the categories, etc. So it was an extremely valuable process of research that I would recommend any institution. Okay, so this was the second example we looked at. Let's recap. The first was the document analysis and the corpus analysis. The second one was exploring school ethos. Sorry, what am I saying? Looking at the schools and institutions' teaching profile using document analysis, i.e. Classroom observation feedback documents. The third one now we're going to look at is exploring a school's ethos and culture, which right from the moment I started working on this was fascinating to me because ethos and culture are quite intangible things. Now, we don't have time to go into the details of what ethos and culture are, but very briefly, it's sort of a dynamic concept, ethos is, and with a lot of contributors, not just people, but actions. Almost anything and everything contributes to a school's ethos. And a nice metaphor that I often use for ethos is it's like a marrow, the marrow of the school. And you get a feeling of ethos, but you can't necessarily pin it down. So the aim of this study was to try and understand or look at and explore both students and teachers' perceptions of what our school's ethos and culture are. In order to do this, we carried out a survey both with teachers and with students. Now, this is the teachers' survey. I'll give you like 15 seconds quietly to look through the questions. SL, by the way, the acronym, means the School of Languages. Okay, I think you've got an idea. Maybe two things to highlight here. One of them is question number 4. I very much believe in metaphors and different ways of eliciting people's opinions, ideas, and experiences, and hence the use of this question, using adjectives or metaphors or statements. The second thing I'd like to highlight, number 6 is also sort of a metaphor, because it says, if your school could speak, what would it say to you? Well, schools can't speak, but, you know, and whenever I use this sort of question type, whether it's with students or teachers, I see that they're quite effective. Okay, and the second thing I wanted to highlight is question number 5. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the wording of that question, through the 3 items provided there, actually ensures that people who contribute or choose whichever of the 3 they want to write, complete or write ideas for, are actually thinking constructively. Especially if you look at number C, not number C, item C, or even item B, I contribute to the School of Languages culture by. So it is actually embracing and involving the instructor, the teacher, as part of the school ethos. It's not saying ethos is here and you're there. I think this is very important. The same goes for C as well. Again, remember I said we don't believe in weaknesses. The wording is such that it's constructive and it's looking at suggestions in terms of how the culture, the ethos can be strengthened. The questionnaire, the survey for, this was an online questionnaire, by the way, and the same is true for the students' questionnaire. Sort of similar, as you can see. One of their questions is more exciting than the one for teachers, I suppose. If you look at question 3, if the ESL school culture were a color, a season, a song, etc., what would it be? Please explain briefly. And question 4 is exactly the same as question 6 for teachers, with 3 items. Again, worded in such a way that students hopefully would provide constructive answers and ideas on, which they did. And I'm very sorry I'm unable to share the results here with you, as it's beyond the scope of the webinar. But if you're interested in receiving the results, if you send me an email, which I shared at the beginning in the initial slide, and I'll do so on the final slide, please send me an email and I'd be very happy to share the results with you. Wonderful responses, wonderful perceptions from students. Remember at the start, when I was sharing the rationale with you, I said one of the reasons why I would like to propose we carry out institutional research is to focus on meaning and understanding. And this is a perfect example for that, because we're giving students an opportunity to tell us what their school means to them, what the culture or ethos of their school means to them. And based on all of this research, there was a very exciting outcome, which is currently on our website, which is on the slide here, the web link on the Sabancı University School of Languages website, under the section Overview and Mission. We actually developed our ethos and culture statement based on the data we collected from teachers and students. And using AndConc, we also developed a frequency list of the concepts mentioned throughout the data. Remember, I mentioned document analysis and AndConc earlier. And we used a word cloud to to design a word cloud of our school ethos. Now, one additional thing I would like to mention here before I move on to the final example in our webinar is that I don't know if my mouse works here, but can you see the word performance in yellow at the top of that tree? That was mentioned as a not so positive aspect by teachers in terms of the culture of our school, the School of Languages. Why not? Well, there were several reasons, and it was mentioned by maybe 5 or 6 instructors, but it was important to us that they felt performance reviews, the performance evaluation process, made our school much more competitive than a desirable approach to competition. So they actually were not very happy with the way performance reviews were carried out, and before the existence of performance reviews. So why am I saying this? I think for a school's ethos and culture to be explored in a healthy fashion, we cannot ignore things that are not maybe going so well. Hence our decision to include everything in that word cloud and in the frequency analysis. Remember, I mentioned appreciative inquiry. Having an appreciative inquiry approach doesn't mean ignoring problems, but it means, don't lose sight of your strengths. Make sure you acknowledge your strengths. So again, this work is based on that sort of mindset. Okay, and a final example in our webinar today, and I'm keeping an eye on the time as well. In fact, I've set the time so it might ring any minute for 45 minutes now, is one that we have on formative feedback whenever we do observation-based professional development practices. What are these? Well, these are developmental observations, as I mentioned earlier. They could be team teaching activities. They could be peer observation practices. That's my alarm. Okay, almost finished there, and on to questions in a minute. And here's a survey, maybe not very legible, but I will highlight it to you. It's pretty straightforward, and it's only one page and one slide here. Basically, what it says is, number one important thing about this survey is that it has been open for I don't know how many years now. As you know, surveys, are carried out and then they're closed, results are shared, or maybe put in a report, and that's the end of it. Well, this one is permanently open. And I think that's extremely useful for an institution to have a survey of this kind, where as people carry out, as you can maybe read here, the items refer to the different observation-based professional development activities. So things like video observations, swapping lessons with a colleague, learner observations, peer observations, etc. And it's asking people to assess the usefulness of these practices. Then in a second question, asking for a brief explanation on why they've said so. And a final question, asking people, instructors, for their suggestions in terms of future or further OPD or professional development-based activities. So permanently open and very good for trainers, for managers, administrators to every now and again look at the data there and see how things are going, and similarly every now and again for the school to share with its teachers what's happening and what the data is suggesting. So this was our fourth example, and to wrap up now, other ideas that an institution might well use are listed here. So the surveys do not have to be anything huge, even if it's just one question, like sending out a mini question on a mini survey on something like, you know, how effective do you believe our curriculum renewal process is? You have a Likert scale, you know, very effective, and then maybe an open comment box, open-ended question, asking people to list, to share their views. Similarly, there could be feedback posters at the end of a seminar, a staff seminar. There could be feedback boxes in the admin office or in a corner of the school where, you know, people feel happier to go and anonymously submit their feedback. Mind you, these days, you know, because we have so many online forms, online tools, we don't really need to worry about handwritten documents, so this could easily be online. And learner and teacher forums, extremely valuable. If you do decide to do student forums, hold student forums, ideally it would be nice to have representatives from different classes or different levels, proficiency levels, or types of groups of students, depending on the nature of your institution. And very simple tasks, again, maybe in the context of a staff meeting or in a seminar, teachers could be asked to complete statements like, you know, one thing I would like to suggest for the assessment scheme of our school is. They could do start, continue, stop tasks like, I would like our school to start implementing. I would like our school to continue doing. Or I would like our school to stop, ... Yeah? Headaches and aspirins, very similar. In fact, we've used this in one of our team building projects where we've asked teachers to share with us their examples of team building issues in terms of communication with colleagues or teaching partners, but we have also similarly sought aspirins or practical ideas and suggestions from them in little teaching forums or group forums. Okay, these are the books I mentioned at the start of the webinar, that I would give the references at the end. I mean, of course, there's so many books on research out there, but in terms of institutional research, I really doubt as to whether we have that many practical examples. All these three books contain practical examples of research carried out both at the institutional level and at the classroom level. And again, you will have access to the slides later, so hopefully you can look at them later and the links should work. If not, please let me know if there's a problem. And I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar and welcome any questions you might have at this stage. Over to you, Andy, maybe?
Thanks very much indeed, Deniz. I hope people can hear me. And if anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat box below if there are any questions for Deniz about that very, very interesting presentation, very interesting ideas there. I suspect many of us have ideas. Now we can go away, I'd like to do that now. I'd like to try something like that. So if any questions, please fire away.
That's okay. So Louise's question, let me see if I can, well, in terms of students, I think we had about 30 students, Louise. This was at the end of the spring semester last year, and we had 30 students responding, not as many as we would have liked. But we were still, we still appreciated that each and every one of those students replied, because this survey was not done in classrooms. And I'm glad you asked that question, because upon reflecting on the study, maybe it would have been better if we actually allocated time within classes, maybe like the last 15 minutes of a class, to get much more participation from students. But we still included each and every one of their responses. Thanks for your question.
Any more questions? I'll give you a few minutes to compose your thoughts and think of your questions.
Yeah, and also please feel free to write to me later on if you have any questions, or if you would like to request any more detail about any of those examples. Looks like 2 people are typing. This is a bit like WhatsApp and some other apps where you see people are typing and you're waiting to see what they're going to type.
Yeah, and then sometimes it says they're typing and then they stop typing and then they obviously decide to not type and then they delete everything, so you never actually find out what they were typing.
No, thank you. Thanks very much, Gökçe. Thank you. How many academic years do you think a device observation research should involve? Billur, what do you mean by device? Oh, okay. In terms of analysis, you mean? The first analysis we did was over a 5-year period. It was pretty, long. And then, there were other things, other priorities like strategic planning in the school, and we sort of ignored, unfortunately, doing it again until the last 3 years where we analyzed it again. So it was a 3-year period. I would say ideally 3 years, minimum 2 years, because, if you want to get a school's profile, you really can't do much unless you're doing many, many developmental observations within a year, which I probably think is not very likely due to resources issues in many institutions. But if that's the case, if you are able to do many observations in 1 year, you could even do it in a year. If not, I would say minimum 2 years. You're welcome. There's Louise's question, I think. If there currently isn't a clear ethos in your learning teaching environment, what is LTO?
Language Teaching Organization.
Oh, right, okay. All right. We have so many acronyms in the field.
LTO is Language Teaching Organization.
All right. I would actually recommend a similar approach. If there is no clear ethos, you see, what do we actually mean by clear ethos? It's an interesting one. I would suggest exploring it with all stakeholders, asking people through questions. Again, maybe using metaphors. The number of questions isn't important. Even if you have a couple of questions, open-ended ones, trying to explore their perceptions of the culture of the school, that you actually carry out a similar study to the one I shared. That would be my recommendation. More positive, in terms of it being more positive, you might remember, Louise, I referred to the wording of the questions. If they are worded in such a way that they actually elicit constructive responses, I think it will make a huge difference. Compared to, and unfortunately we have too many of those out there, surveys like, including questions like, what are your weaknesses? Or what are the school's weaknesses? And, people just ramble on and on about all the problems and, things that they want to be changed. And that's not a healthy way of going about it. So I would suggest using a similar study, but making sure the wording is has a constructive approach to it, and putting responsibility also on people, not just the school or the system, because it's easy to say, it's the school's responsibility to change that, not mine. That's why we have a sentence completion which was worded, how was it worded? I believe I can foster SL culture by. Do you remember that? So I would suggest those types of questions and study. Hope that's useful.
I think that's in some ways a perfect way to end, because maybe next time we can have a webinar about how can we create a new culture in our schools, because I think that's a question that many people will want to ask, and I think in some ways maybe that's the next step of this process of looking at what we have and saying, well, what would we like it to be? So, well, thank you very much indeed, Deniz, and thank you all of you people for coming, everyone who yes, attended. As Deniz mentioned, this webinar, the whole hour, will be available. The recording of it will be available online. I'll try and put that up in the next few minutes, and it will be on the LAMSIG website, which is where you found the link to this webinar. So if you just go back to the same page, within about 10-15 minutes, you should see up there a link to the webinar. And you're, of course, please tell anybody that you know who you think might be interested, who wasn't able to attend this particular webinar, to please to watch it in their spare time. It will be publicly available to everybody for about a week or so, and then I'll put it behind sort of a password protected area for members of LAMSIG only. So members of LAMSIG will be able to watch it. Will be able to watch it anytime. Anyone who's not a member of LAMSIG you can watch it for the next week or so, and after that it will be more difficult to find. Again, thank you very much, Deniz. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope everybody who attended enjoyed it very much.
Thank you for thanking me, and probably off to dinner now. I don't know. Enjoy a drink or go mark homework like I'm going to do. But it's been great having you. Thank you. And thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Deniz. And just to give a quick piece of advertisement, if anyone's able to attend the ITEFL conference in Brighton this year, the day before the conference, this year, the pre-conference event, LAMSIG is working with Teacher Development SIG, and the day is all about how to create a teacher development system which is much more bottom-up, so teacher-led professional development system for teachers in schools. And I think that should be a very interesting day. And subsequent to that, in early June, we're doing a conference in Bratislava in Slovakia, if anyone is able to attend that. So thank you for paying attention. You'll find all the details on the website and the Facebook page and the Twitter account. Thanks very much indeed, and thanks again,
welcome.
Deniz.
Thank you. Bye.